At 2:17 Universal Time Coordinated, every major observatory on Earth registered the same anomaly. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. The instruments were not linked in any meaningful operational sense. Radio telescopes in Chile, orbital arrays above Earth's atmosphere, deep space listening posts in Australia, and the aging but still functional lunar relay network all ran independent calibration cycles. They were designed to avoid synchronized false positives. Yet at that exact second, every single one of them produced the same spike. Dr. Evan Carter noticed it first because he was still awake. He had been awake too long. The Kepler Deep Survey project had been a dead end for nearly 7 years, and most of the team had quietly reassigned themselves to more productive work. Carter, however, had stayed. Part stubbornness, part obsession, and part the sinking suspicion that if humanity ever did find something out there, it wouldn't arrive politely. His screen flickered. A waveform appeared. Then another. Then a cascade of overlapping telemetry bursts that should not have existed in that configuration. Calibration error, someone in the control room muttered. But Carter didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the pattern forming beneath the noise. It wasn't random. Noise in deep space had a signature. Chaotic, fractal, entropic. This was different. This was structured repetition. A pulse repeating at precise intervals, each cycle adjusting by an almost imperceptible margin. Like something was correcting itself. Carter leaned closer. Run a spectral decomposition on that signal. A junior analyst obeyed, fingers trembling slightly as they pulled the data apart. The room went quiet as the results populated the main display. The signal was not thermal noise. It wasn't electromagnetic reflection. It wasn't stellar interference. It was consistent energy release patterns originating from a single point source. Kepler 186f. A planet long dismissed as biologically barren. Carter felt something cold settle in his chest. That's impossible, he said quietly. No one contradicted him, because the data didn't care about belief. The pulse repeated again, stronger this time. And then something changed. A second layer appeared beneath it. Not interference. Structure. The signal was encoding variation, tiny modulations in frequency, amplitude, and decay rate that formed a repeating sequence. It wasn't just emitting energy. It was communicating through it. One of the engineers whispered, "That looks like biological rhythm." Carter shook his head automatically. No, life doesn't broadcast like that from interstellar distances. Not without. He stopped, because the pattern had shifted again. Now it resembled a heartbeat. Slow, irregular, then stabilizing into a steady rhythm that all instruments across the globe were now independently confirming in real time. A synchronized detection event. Across Earth, every listening array, every satellite receiver, every deep space antenna, all of them locked onto the same signal. And it was getting closer. Are we being jammed? Someone asked nervously. Carter didn't answer immediately. His mind was already racing ahead of the question. Jamming implied intention. Control. This didn't feel like control. It felt like discovery. Or worse, awareness. He pulled up the planetary feed data for Kepler 186f. Surface models. Atmospheric scans. Heat maps. All of it was outdated by years, and all of it showed the same thing. Nothing. No industrial heat signature. No atmospheric disturbance. No large-scale biological activity. Just a cold, quiet world orbiting its star in mathematical silence. And yet, the signal was coming from there, directly from the surface. Then came the shift that made the entire room stop breathing. The pulse pattern changed again. Not in frequency, not in intensity, but in structure. It began to form frames. Carter's hands froze over the console. Zoom in on temporal resolution, he ordered. The analyst obeyed. The display resolved further. And for the first time, the team saw it. The signal wasn't just repeating. It was sequencing images. Slowly at first. Fragmented. Like a camera learning how to focus. Then more stable. More deliberate. The waveform resolved into a thermal pattern. A shape. Small. Symmetrical. Moving. And then, a face. The room went dead silent. It was not human. Not even close. The proportions were wrong. The anatomy unfamiliar, but unmistakably deliberate in its structure. It had eyes. Large, reflective, luminous. And they were moving. Tracking. Responding. To Earth's observation arrays. Carter felt his throat tighten. That's not a natural formation. No, someone whispered behind him. That's alive. The image shifted again. The entity tilted its head. Not randomly, not chaotically. It was reacting to them watching it. And then it did something that made every instrument in the room spike simultaneously. It looked directly into the signal, directly into Earth's detection network, as if it could see them watching, as if it had always known they were there. Carter took a slow step back from the console. The heartbeat pattern stabilized, and for the first time since detection began, a clean modulation appeared in the data stream, deliberate, precise, unmistakably structured. Not a biological rhythm, not an image, a message, encoded in mathematical recursion too complex for immediate translation. But one thing was clear even before decoding began. It was trying to speak, and it had just realized it had an audience. The first leak didn't come from scientists. It came from a maintenance technician, a junior orbital systems engineer named Miles Redding, who had no security clearance high enough to understand what he was looking at, and therefore no psychological preparation for it either. He was running a diagnostic check on the relay buffer when the anomaly file autocached to his terminal. At first, it looked like corruption. Compressed telemetry bursts stacked in irregular frames, flickering between thermal readouts and electromagnetic noise. He almost deleted it. Then the pattern stabilized, and the image formed. Miles stopped breathing. It wasn't a photograph. It wasn't a video in the conventional sense. It was something being reconstructed in real time from signal decay across multiple light-minute delays, an attempt at visual continuity stitched together from fragmented energy emissions. A face. Small, thin-limbed, symmetrical in a way that suggested intention rather than evolution. Its surface shimmered with crystalline microstructures that bent light in unpredictable ways, like scales made of fractured glass. And its eyes were wrong in a way that made Miles's stomach tighten. Not because they were alien, because they were focused, directly outward, directly through the signal stream, directly at him. Miles stumbled backward, knocking his chair over. Nope, 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 this is above my pay grade, he muttered, already reaching for the system wipe command. But before he could execute it, the image blinked. Once. Slowly. Deliberately. Miles froze. It had blinked. Not as a glitch. Not as frame loss. The motion was too clean, too coordinated across the signal reconstruction layers. It was reacting. To him. His hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. Then the system flagged a secondary transmission layer he hadn't noticed before. Beneath the image, buried in the thermal noise, something else was emerging. A repeating modulation pattern. Structured. Intentional. Miles didn't know what it was, but he knew enough to understand what it wasn't. It wasn't random. And it wasn't human. Within 12 hours, the file was everywhere. Somewhere between the secure government network, a misconfigured backup server, and an overworked in turns unauthorized USB transfer, the data escaped containment. By the time the Kepler Deep Survey Project realized the breach, it was already too late. The Internet had seen it, and the Internet had named it. At first, it was the Kepler thing. Then Glass Eyes. Then, after a viral post by a linguistics student who insisted it looked like it was trying to understand us. The name stuck. Ember. No one knew why. It just felt right. Dr. Evan Carter found out about the leak when his personal phone began vibrating nonstop at 4:03 Universal Time Coordinated. He ignored the first dozen notifications. Then the 50th. Then the classified alert from Central Command. Then the emergency override call. By the time he reached the control center, the entire room was already lit with projected feeds from global social networks, all converging on a single subject. Millions of reposts. Millions of interpretations. Millions of people arguing about whether it was real, fake, or something in between. But the original signal file was still playing on loop in the corner of every display. Ember. Blinking. Watching. Carter stared at it for a long time without speaking. Then he said quietly, "Pull the raw transmission layer. I want to see what's beneath the image reconstruction." An engineer hesitated. "Doctor, that's classified at Tier 9. Carter didn't look away from the screen. So his first contact. "Run it." Reluctantly, they complied. The visual collapsed. What remained was the signal itself. And that's when everything changed. Because Ember was not just transmitting images. It was adjusting its output in response to Earth's observation density. When MOS systems focused on it, the resolution sharpened. When attention dropped, the signal degraded. It was optimizing, learning, adapting. Carter felt something uncomfortable settle in his thoughts. It's using us as a calibration reference, he said. A silence followed. Then a junior analyst spoke up, voice unsteady. Say, it's not just reacting to us. What do you mean? Carter asked. The analyst pointed at the waveform. It's anticipating us. They expanded the timeline. And there it was. The signal adjustments were occurring before Earth's observational changes, before telescope realignments, before satellite recalibration commands, before human reaction time could account for it. Ember was not merely responding. It was predicting. The room fell quiet in a way that felt heavier than sound. Carter leaned closer to the display. The heartbeat pattern returned, stronger now, faster. And then, beneath it, a new structure formed. A layered modulation sequence embedded within the signal's rhythm. Not random noise. Not biological rhythm. A structured attempt at communication. One of the linguists whispered, "It's encoding something. A phrase structure maybe." Carter nodded slowly. "Start decoding." Minutes passed. Then hours. Then silence broke again, because the first translated fragment appeared on the screen. 4 words. Simple. Precise. Unmistakable. Do not come. The room went still. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the machine seemed to hesitate, as if processing the implications. Then the signal shifted again. Stronger. More focused. The image of Ember flickered back into partial reconstruction. No longer passive. No longer observational. Its eyes were no longer simply watching. They were warning. And beneath the warning, another phrase began forming. More complex. More urgent. And far more terrifying than anything that had come before. By the time Dr. Carter reached his office the next morning, the situation had already escaped every containment protocol known to modern security doctrine. Not broken. Not bypassed. Simply overwhelmed. The Kepler anomaly file had spread through civilian networks faster than any controlled dissemination model could account for. What should have taken weeks of internal review and classification review cycles had instead taken 6 hours of screenshots, reposts, and unsecured peer-to-peer transfers. And now it had a name. Ember. Carter stared at the word on his terminal like it had weight. It didn't come from any official source. No scientist, no agency, no institutional naming convention. It came from a comment thread on an anonymous forum where someone wrote, "It looks like something small trying to survive in a cold universe. Like an ember." It stuck. That was the problem with humans, Carter thought. They couldn't leave anything unnamed. Even the unknown got domesticated through language. Behind him, analysts were already struggling to regain control of the narrative. "It's trending globally," one said. 3 billion impressions in under 10 hours, another added. A third, almost whispering, "There are fan pages." Carter turned slowly. Fan pages. The analyst hesitated. They're drawing it, interpreting behavior, assigning emotional states based on signal fluctuations. Carter rubbed his forehead. It's a data artifact, not a pet. No one responded to that, not because they disagreed, but because it didn't matter anymore. Ember had already crossed the threshold where definition belonged to science. Now it belonged to perception. Outside the secure facility, the world was doing what it always did when confronted with the incomprehensible. It turned it into something familiar enough to tolerate. In Tokyo, someone projected Ember's reconstructed image onto a skyscraper wall with captions like "It's shy." In Berlin, a research collective attempted to map its blinking pattern to emotional states. In Sao Paulo, a livestream titled "We Talk to Ember Live" had already reached 20 million viewers before moderators could intervene. And in every corner of the internet, one question dominated every thread. Is it trying to talk to us? Carter didn't like that question, because the data already answered it. It wasn't trying. It already was. The second major breakthrough came at 1341 Universal Time Coordinated. A junior cryptographer named Lila Grant noticed something strange in the signal decomposition logs. The warning phrase, "Do not come," wasn't isolated. It was embedded within a larger recursive structure that repeated every 47.3 seconds. But each repetition wasn't identical. It evolved. Slightly. Systematically. as if the message itself was being refined in real time. "Dr. Carter," she called out, voice tight, "you need to see this." He arrived within minutes. The projection filled the room. Raw signal, decoded fragments, comparative overlays. Carter studied it silently, then said, "It's learning language stability." Lila shook her head. "That's not the disturbing part." She expanded the dataset. The system highlighted new patterns emerging beneath the warning phrase, hidden layers that had not been visible before. Carter leaned closer. The signal wasn't just transmitting. It was adapting its communication strategy based on Earth's decoding attempts. Every time humans tried to interpret it, Ember adjusted the encoding complexity. Every time they succeeded in partial translation, the structure became more refined. And every time attention increased, the signal intensified, like pressure building in response to observation. Carter exhaled slowly. "It's reacting to being understood." Lila nodded, "Or trying to ensure we understand correctly." That distinction mattered, and neither of them liked either option. Then came the moment that changed everything. A global synchronization event occurred across observation platforms. Not planned, not coordinated, just a coincidental convergence of telescope tracking cycles, satellite repositioning, and amateur radio focus alignment. For 0.7 seconds, every major Earth-based and orbital system observed Ember simultaneously. And Ember noticed. The signal spiked. Not in noise, in clarity. For the first time, the reconstructed image stabilized completely. No fragmentation, no delay artifacts, no signal degradation. A perfect, uninterrupted visual feed. Ember appeared whole, smaller than expected, fragile, its crystalline body shifting subtly as if reacting to unseen forces. Its head tilted slightly upward, toward something beyond the frame of human observation. And then it did something unprecedented. It reacted to Earth's attention in real time. Every increase in observation density caused measurable changes in its posture, orientation, and emission patterns. It was no longer just being observed. It was interacting with the act of observation itself. A technician whispered, "It knows we're all watching at once." Carter didn't answer, because he was watching the same thing, and realizing something far worse. Ember wasn't just aware of humanity. It was aware of how humanity paid attention. Then the signal shifted again. This time, there was no hesitation, no ambiguity. A clean, structured transmission formed within the noise floor. The linguist scrambled to decode it in real time, and when it resolved, the room went silent, because the message was no longer just a warning. It was a statement, a conclusion, a recognition. 3 words. Short, simple, final. "They saw you first." Carter felt the room change around him. Not physically, psychologically, as if the message had introduced a new variable into reality itself. Lila's voice trembled. "Who is they?" No one answered, because the system had already begun to react. Satellite telemetry across multiple agencies flickered. Deep space tracking arrays began recalibrating automatically. And Ember was no longer looking at Earth. It was looking past it, as if something behind humanity's line of sight had finally moved. After the phrase, "They saw you first," nothing in the control room behaved normally again. It wasn't panic, not immediately. It was worse. It was hesitation, the kind that spreads through trained professionals when their models stop matching reality, and no one is willing to say it out loud first. Dr. Carter stood motionless in front of the main display. The reconstructed image of Ember still hovered there, stabilized now in a way that felt unnatural, as if the signal had decided to remain visible rather than being forced into clarity. Its eyes were no longer scanning. They were waiting. Behind him, systems engineers attempted to rerun the decoding pipeline. "Check redundancy layers," one said. "Rebuild signal isolation parameters," another added. But Lila Grant didn't move. She was staring at something different. Not the image, not the waveform, the background noise. "Doctor," she said quietly, "the noise is structured." Carter turned. "Everything in that signal is structured." "No," she said, voice tightening. "Not like this. This is separate." She expanded the spectral analysis window. At first, it looked like typical cosmic interference, random fluctuations, baseline entropy, the expected chaos of deep space transmission. But when filtered through a higher-order correlation algorithm, patterns began to emerge. Not random at all. Repeating intervals. Nested sequences. Mathematical relationships embedded inside what should have been pure noise. Carter stepped closer. The system highlighted segments of the background radiation that aligned across multiple observation channels simultaneously. This wasn't in the primary signal, Lila said. It's been hiding underneath it the entire time. A technician frowned. A carrier wave. No, Lila replied. A second message. Silence fell again. Then Carter said, separated. The room obeyed. Layer by layer, the system peeled away the visible transmission, the image of Ember, the heartbeat pulse, the warning phrase, and isolated the substrate beneath it. What remained was something no one in the room had expected. A structured language. Not human, not machine, but undeniably deliberate. It was older than the visible signal, and it had been there the entire time. The decoded output began to form slowly across the main screen. Fragments first, then alignment, then coherence. Carter read the first translated segment aloud without realizing he was doing it. Observation threshold exceeded. Lila swallowed. Threshold of what? The system continued. Local detection vector confirmed. Another line appeared. Secondary observer identified. A cold feeling settled in the room. Carter leaned in. Secondary observer. The system paused, then added, primary subject, Earth. A beat passed. Then another line formed beneath it. Contamination risk, active. No one spoke, because the implication was now unavoidable. Ember wasn't just communicating outward. It was reporting inward, to something else. The next transmission spike hit without warning. Every monitoring station registered it simultaneously. But this time, the signal wasn't directed at Earth alone. It was broadcasting outward in multiple synchronized vectors, like a lighthouse sweeping across regions of space far beyond Kepler 186f. Carter felt his throat tighten. It's amplifying. Lila shook her head quickly. No, it's broadcasting confirmation. Confirmation of what? She didn't answer immediately, because the next decoded line already appeared. Awakening sequence detected. Then, proximity breach acknowledged. And finally, origin observers notified. Carter stepped back from the console. The words didn't make sense in human framing, but they didn't need to, because they implied something simple and devastating. Ember was not alone. It had never been alone. The image on the screen flickered. For the first time since detection began, Ember moved in a way that wasn't observational. It shifted position rapidly, as if responding to an unseen stimulus. Its crystalline surface pulsed with irregular light patterns. Not biological rhythm, not emotional reaction, but signal interference. Like something else was answering back. Carter pointed. Is that external influence? An engineer ran diagnostics. No incoming signal detected. Then what is that? Carter demanded. No one answered, because the system itself was beginning to behave unpredictably. Telemetry feeds were reordering themselves. Satellite clusters were auto-adjusting orientation angles without command input. Even ground-based observatories began rotating in coordinated patterns that no human operator had authorized. Lila whispered, "It's not just communication anymore." Carter turned to her. "Explain." She hesitated, then said, "It's alignment." The final decoded segment arrived at 1906 Universal Time Coordinated. But by then, the room was no longer reacting like a scientific facility. It felt like something between a laboratory and an evacuation zone. People half-working, half-watching, waiting for instructions that no one had authority to give. Carter stood at the center of it all, eyes fixed on the screen. Ember's image was still visible, but now it looked smaller, as if something larger was pressing against it from beyond the signal boundary. The final message appeared. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. Interference source located. A pause. Then, origin vector, Earth observation network. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the last line formed. And everything stopped. Do not respond further. The screen went still. Not dark. Not corrupted. Still. As if the signal had finished what it came to say and was now waiting for consequences beyond its control. Carter exhaled slowly. Behind him, no one spoke, because every instrument in the room had gone quiet at the exact same moment. Not failure. Not shutdown. Silence. Absolute and synchronized. Then Lila whispered the only question that mattered now. What did we just wake up? The silence after the warning wasn't empty. It was loaded. Dr. Carter had spent years studying cosmic noise, signal drift, and the subtle unpredictability of deep space observation. But nothing in his training accounted for what came next. Because silence, true, system-wide silence, was not a natural state for global observation infrastructure. It was a decision, or a shutdown, or something choosing not to speak. For 11 seconds, every connected telescope, relay satellite, and deep space monitoring station went dark across the same synchronized interval. No alarms triggered. No backup systems activated. No manual overrides responded. And then, everything came back, but not as it was before. The first thing Carter noticed was the live stream. It shouldn't have existed. All public feeds had been cut following the Do Not Respond Further directive. Civilian access to Kepler 186f data streams had been revoked, firewalled, and physically segmented from global networks. And yet, one feed was active, untraceable in origin, unroutable through standard network topology, just present. A single live window occupying every major display in the control center at once. Lila stepped back. That's not possible. Carter didn't answer, because Ember was there again. The image was clearer than before. Too clear. No delay artifacts. No reconstruction lag. No signal degradation from interstellar distance. It looked as if the camera was inside the same room. Ember had changed. Not dramatically, but enough that the human brain registered it as wrong. Its crystalline body appeared more defined now, edges sharper, light bending unnaturally across its surface like it was no longer bound by the same physical constraints as before. Its proportions had shifted subtly, more upright, more stable, as if it had adapted to prolonged observation, or had been forced into it. And its eyes, they were no longer simply watching Earth. They were tracking something moving around it. Carter felt a chill rise slowly through his chest. "Where's the feed coming from?" he asked. No one answered, because no system could locate it. The live stream had no origin point, no transmission source, no signal path. It was simply being displayed, across everything, simultaneously. Then Ember moved, but not like before. This wasn't a reaction to observation density or signal calibration. This was deliberate motion directed at something outside the frame of human detection. It turned its head slightly upward, and paused, as if listening. For the first time since the anomaly began, the background radiation around it changed. Not flickering, not noise distortion, interruption. A second pattern began to emerge in the signal stream, not from Ember, but intersecting it, like something else was finally responding. Carter stepped closer to the display. That interference pattern, it's not from Kepler. Lila shook her head slowly. It's not from anywhere in our catalog. The waveform expanded across the screen. And then Ember reacted. Instantly. Violently. Its crystalline surface flared with irregular pulses of light, shifting through rapid spectral changes that the system struggled to interpret. The signal density spiked beyond recorded thresholds, forcing automatic attenuation protocols to engage, and then fail. Whatever was interacting with it was not passive. It was answering back. And then Ember spoke. Not in mathematics. Not in encoded recursion. In sound. A synthetic vocalization emerged through every connected speaker on Earth simultaneously. Not translated. Not interpreted. Direct. Raw. A voice formed from reconstructed signal harmonics stretched across impossible distances. One word. Run. The word didn't echo. It collapsed space. Every monitoring system registered a gravitational anomaly spike synchronized with the audio burst. Satellites began drifting off expected orbital paths by measurable fractions. Atomic clocks experienced micro-desynchronization events. Carter staggered slightly. "That's not communication," he said. "That's influence." Lila grabbed the edge of the console. Influence of what? No one had an answer, because Ember was no longer alone in the frame. Something had appeared behind it. Not fully visible. Not fully formed. Just a distortion in the background space where reality itself seemed to lose coherence. Ember shifted again, now clearly focused on it. Not Earth. Not the observers. That, whatever it was. The live stream flickered. For the first time, latency appeared. Then fragmentation. then compression artifacts that should not exist in a signal that had no transmission medium. Carter felt his pulse accelerate. It's being degraded. No, Lila said, eyes wide. It's being overwritten. The interference expanded. The unknown presence behind Ember grew more defined, not visually, but structurally, like a pattern revealing itself through gravitational lensing and signal disruption rather than light. Ember moved closer to it. Not away. Closer. As if recognizing it. As if responding to something older than the signal itself. Then everything stopped. Not abruptly. Not violently. But cleanly. The live stream stabilized one final time. Ember filled the frame completely now. No background. No distortion. Just it. And silence. The control room held its breath. Carter didn't move. No one did. Ember looked directly forward. Not at Earth. Not at the instruments. At whoever was behind them. And for the first time, its expression changed. Not fear. Not curiosity. But recognition. Then it spoke again. Quietly. Almost gently. One final transmission. Not broadcast. Not encoded. Just present in every system simultaneously. You were not supposed to see this. A pause. Then the signal collapsed. Not shut down. Not cut off. Collapsed. Like a structure losing the rules that held it together. The screen went black. Everywhere. All at once. For 4.3 seconds. Nothing existed on any observation network. No telemetry. No background radiation interpretation. No satellite feedback. No cosmic input. Just absence. Then systems rebooted. Automatically. Independently. Without command. And every single one displayed the same final corrupted log entry. Origin event, observation recognized. Status, reciprocal contact established. Secondary response, inbound. Carter stared at the words, slowly understanding something he didn't want to understand. Ember had not been the discovery. It had been the signal flay. And something had just seen it.